Let's go back to the mid-1970s. The country was hitting its bicentennial. Happy Days was the hit show on TV, and everybody wanted to be like the Fonz. Disco music was starting to take off, and technology was advancing. It was a time when taking a video game with you was almost unimaginable. Video games belonged in two places, the arcade or the family living room. The idea of carrying a video game in your backpack or your pocket felt like something straight out of science fiction. Today, we're traveling back to a time when Christmas morning required a shopping cart full of AA batteries, back when every department store had a display case glowing with futuristic tech, and back when the biggest decision a kid could make was figuring out which box to point out to Santa.
And this is the story of Tomy's handhelds and tabletops.
To understand why Tomy's handhelds became so legendary, we first have to look at the landscape before they arrived. In the mid-1970s, electronic gaming was still in its absolute infancy. Home consoles like Atari's Pong had only recently introduced families to the concept of controlling video games on their TV. Even then, dedicated consoles were viewed by many parents as expensive, fleeting novelties rather than household essentials. Meanwhile, the arcades were just exploding. Titles like Breakout, Gunfight, and eventually Space Invaders were drawing crowds unlike anything the world had ever seen. For kids in the 1970s, walking into an arcade felt like stepping into the future. The flashing lights, the synthesized sounds, and the vibrant cabinet art. It was just a sensory overload that simply could not be recreated at home, and naturally, toy manufacturers wanted a piece of that hype. Industry giants like Mattel Electronics began experimenting with handheld sports games, proving that there was a massive, ravenous appetite for portable entertainment. Their success sent a loud, clear message to the rest of the toy industry. Kids didn't just want electronic toys, they wanted to take the arcade with them. Now, Tomy was paying very close attention. Founded in Japan in 1924, Tomy had spent decades building a stellar reputation for producing toys. They weren't born out of the Silicon Valley boom. Their expertise laid in mechanical ingenuity, hands-on gameplay, and clever tactile design. And as it turned out, those exact strengths would become the defining features for their electronic gaming division. And it all started with deceptively simple mechanical toys, like Drive Yourself Crazy. With the success of the mechanical toys, Tomy wanted to get into the electronic gaming industry. They weren't trying to compete with Atari in the home, and they weren't trying to replace the arcade either. Instead, they asked a much more practical question. How do we give kids something to play with when there isn't a television around? Remember, this was years before the Game Boy, years before the Sega Game Gear, and even before Nintendo's own Game & Watch series had hit the market. Profitable electronic gaming was still the Wild West, and every toy company had a different blueprint of what the future would look like. And for Tomy, that future began with a Blip. If you never held a Tomy Blip in person, it's almost impossible to appreciate how bizarre this thing is. Nothing about it screams cutting-edge video game technology. And then, what did you do to play it? You had to wind it up, like a watch. And your job as the player is to push the corresponding button to return the ball before it slips past you. That's it, just one little moving light, and yet, it was absolutely addictive. The brilliant secret of Blip was that it wasn't an actual electronic game in the modern sense. The vast majority of the magic was happening purely through mechanical gears. The battery-powered LED simply enhanced the illusion. It was classic Tomy engineering overcoming the high cost of microprocessors with pure design brilliance. It was more than just another Pong clone, and it's easy to look back at Blip today and dismiss it as primitive. But that's judging history through modern eyes. I mean, picture yourself in the backseat of a 1970s station wagon on a grueling family road trip. No smartphones, no iPads, no built-in DVD players. If you were lucky, you had a comic book, but if you were really lucky, you had Blip. Suddenly, those endless miles got a little shorter. Tomy quickly proved that they weren't interested in following the pack. While Mattel doubled down on sports simulations and other brands chased expensive arcade licenses, Tomy leaned entirely into quirky, original concepts. By 1978, encouraged by Blip's massive success, they expanded their horizons.
They launched Digital Diamond, which brought handheld baseball to the masses.
and Digital Daredevil, a game that challenged players with split-second timing and mechanical dexterity. They were colorful and built to survive being aggressively tossed into a toy box. And because they were built like tanks, collectors could still easily find fully functional units nearly 50 years later. But as the 1970s drew to a close, the entire gaming industry changed overnight. Video games evolved into a multi-billion-dollar phenomenon. The race was no longer about making clever electronic toys. It was about bringing the arcade to the home. Tomy knew mechanical tricks could only take them so far. To compete in the dawn of the 1980s, they needed a new weapon, a technology that glowed brighter than standard LEDs. That technology was the vacuum fluorescent display, and it was about to kickstart Tomy's golden age. Instead of isolated dots, VFDs utilized bright, multicolored phosphor shapes that appeared to float across the pitch-black void. Vibrant greens, intense oranges, and cool electronic blues could all occupy the screen at the same time. If you turned off the bedroom lights, the Tomy tabletop instantly transformed your desk into a miniature, glowing neon arcade. In 1981, there was one arcade title every single toy manufacturer was desperate to license: Pac-Man. It wasn't just a popular game, it was a global obsession. Tomy secured the rights and delivered a tabletop version that immediately turned heads. Molded in bright, iconic yellow plastic, the cabinet looked like a cross between a miniature arcade machine and a science fiction prop. When you first fired it up, you were greeted by a glowing maze, distinctively colored ghost, and a surprisingly expressive Pac-Man. Was it arcade perfect? No, but it captured the soul of the arcade. Today, it remains one of Tomy's most iconic creations. Now, if there was a single movie property perfectly tailored for the VFD technology, it was Disney's 1982 sci-fi epic Tron. Its neon cyber landscapes translated flawlessly into Tomy's fluorescent displays, creating a remarkably atmospheric experience despite the straightforward, reflex-driven gameplay. But Tomy wasn't just chasing Hollywood blockbusters. In the exact same year, they released Caveman. Instead of spaceships or sports, you were navigating a colorful prehistoric world dodging dinosaurs. But the industry was moving at a breakneck speed. Nintendo was rapidly capturing the ultra-portable market with their slim Game & Watch line, while Coleco was launching their own line of heavy-hitting arcade tabletops. Tomy realized that, to stay ahead, they couldn't just keep making the same style of cabinets. They needed a concept so bold, so radically different, that it would completely redefine how players interacted with a handheld game. They didn't want you to just look at a screen anymore. They wanted you to look inside another dimension. By 1983, the electronic handheld market was cannibalizing itself. The novelty of simple handheld tech had worn off, and store shelves were completely oversaturated. If you wanted to capture the imagination of a kid in 1983, you had to pull off some kind of miracle. Tomy's response? The Tomytronic 3D. The first time kids saw this device, they had absolutely no clue what they were looking at. Decades before the Virtual Boy or modern VR headsets, this humble plastic toy was trying to convince kids they were looking directly into a three-dimensional digital universe. The wizardry inside of the Tomytronic 3D was brilliantly elegant, with each eye viewing a slightly offset image through a precise configuration of internal mirrors and lenses. Your brain did the heavy lifting, fusing the two images together to create the sensation of true three-dimensional space. But for the few that actually did own it, games like Planet Xeon were unforgettable. Space shooters were the definitive genre of the era, and Planet Xeon added a whole new layer of tension. Enemy ships didn't just move left and right, they aggressively scaled up from the depths of the screen, hurtling straight toward your face. Tomy rolled out various LCD games. While it was a smart business move, the standalone electronic handheld was slowly losing its unique identity, becoming more of a promotional merchandise piece than a cutting-edge technology toy. And then came 1989, the year the floor fell out from underneath the dedicated handheld market. Nintendo had released the Game Boy. The Game Boy wasn't a powerhouse on paper. It had a monochrome, non-backlit green screen and a modest processor. By the early 1990s, the golden era of the standalone electronic handheld was over. Tomy, Mattel, Intex, and Bandai all had to face a new reality of the market. The cartridge had won. Tomy didn't vanish, of course. They remained a massive, incredibly successful toy titan to this day. Now, unfortunately for us Gen Xers, that meant an end of an era. an end of the Tomy handhelds and tabletops like Blip, Digital Diamond, Tomytronic Tron, all those great games. But they still live on. And if you like these games or have any stories of them, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear. Also, if you dig the content, don't forget to hit that like, that subscribe, that notification bell. Also hit that hype. And if you want to help support the channel, you consider becoming a member or actually dropping a super down below. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have a great one. Peace out.
Game over, man. It's game over.